It's a portrait of a patriot
I'm willing to meet my creator and answer for every shot that I took.
who, on screen and in life, saw the Iraq War as good versus evil.
Every person I killed, I have a clear conscience of.
Some say American Sniper lionizes a professional killer in a questionable war.
I'll pick it up. Drop it.
Audiences see something else.
I think right now people want to see a movie that's about a real-life hero.
It's a time for real-life heroes. Canada's own Kevin Vickers.
Look at that magnificent bastard! Stoic!
The Paris grocery worker who hid shoppers during the hostage-taking. But there used to be another kind of box office hero, the whistleblower.
There are many sides to Serpico. A hero who was hated, a loner who was loved.
Why are there medical records and blood samples in real estate files?
Would you mind if I investigate this a little further?
But a whistleblower to some is often a traitor to others.
This is a man who has betrayed his country.
Edward Snowden is in exile after revealing vast government spying on Americans.
Being a patriot doesn't mean prioritizing service to government above all else. Sometimes to do the right thing, you have to break a law.
An Oscar-nominated documentary about him isn't breaking box office records. After all, it's a lot easier to call someone a hero when they follow the rules. Tonight, we're joined by our Sunday panelists. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief of the Walrus magazine. John Moore is a talk radio host in Toronto. And Supriya Dwivedi is a communications strategist specializing in government relations. So often we talk about the big affairs of the day and federal politics and the big bursting issues, but today let's talk about a movie and our idea of what heroism is. What do you think, John? Is Chris Kyle your idea of a hero?
He's a conventional military hero. He signed up for war. He signed up to go kill bad guys as he saw them. And then when his tour ended, he kept re-signing up over and over. So he is, in a way, an old-fashioned stereotype of a hero. That's who we are used to seeing as heroic.
What do you think, Supriya?
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, I agree with you that he's a conventional hero, but I think a guy who brags about killing people, who referred to the Iraqi people as savages, and who claimed to have killed looters during Hurricane Katrina, I don't think that's somebody we should necessarily be lionizing.
But the reason I think it's old-fashioned is because if you look at old war films, when Americans were killing Nazis or whatever, there was this clear distinction between the hero and the villains, who were often portrayed as sort of less than human, sort of almost cartoon characters. They had no human element to them. And I think that's how the film presents the victims of a lot of the people that Chris Kyle was killing, as somehow just kind of extras without any sort of human aspect to them. So in that sense, the film does, I think, have an old-fashioned war film aspect to it.
Yeah, sure, I agree. I just don't know if we should be considering him a hero today.
Well, a lot of people seem to be quite enthralled by the whole idea of him as a hero. It's a huge success. What do you think? Is he a hero, John?
It's hard to say. I mean, certainly as depicted in the movie, I guess he does qualify as a hero. I mean, I'm one of those Oxford school guys who has to, first we have to define our terms. So I would say
you need a tie or
yeah, I know, and an ascot and a bicycle and a monocle. I would say my definition of a hero is somebody who makes some degree of personal sacrifice, or there's the potential for greater sacrifice for a goal that is worth achieving. This fellow, I mean, he's a very conflicted person. You're right. In the book, it's insane some of the things he claims to have done. There's a bizarro aspect to the whole thing. But he did suit up and go to war, and he was in the front line of combat. And so along those lines, I would say conventional hero, absolutely.
And very manly man, John.
I think it's important to say that there's a certain awkwardness at describing these people on the battlefield who really are sacrificing their lives. When, I'm a journalist, I work out of a cubicle. It is awkward to say, well, this guy's a hero, this guy's not a hero. To my mind, anybody who suits up, who goes to war, who puts their life on the line for a cause they believe in, I mean, it is a heroic thing to do. However, there's also a moral aspect to the cause. If it's just risk, terrorists, they risk their own life and limb to do something, but they're doing something evil. So it's not just risking life and limb for a larger purpose. We have to morally agree with that purpose to ascribe heroism to them.
So who is a hero?
I agree with John's definition here and John's definition here. But I think, I don't like to really qualify anybody really as a hero. I mean, they're definitely heroic people, but I just don't think we should be putting people on these pedestals and making them into these superhuman-like caricatures that have no flaws or faults.
I think society needs heroes, and I think on an individual level, I'm going to say that men especially, they think a lot about heroism, because especially when they have families, often they go around thinking, what would I do if there were a fire? What would I do if my family were...
Well, there was that movie about that, about
yeah.
the guy who was accused of letting his wife down in
force
the
majeure,
avalanche.
force majeure, right. The European film, and the plot involved an avalanche or a potential avalanche, and he grabbed his phone instead of protecting his family, and it tormented him. Not to give away the ending, but I think there are a lot of men especially who go around thinking about that kind of thing. Like, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah, and I think that's an important aspect. It's the matter of being tested. You know, the clerk in the grocery store in Paris who actually, hid out, provided important intelligence, did something that saved lives. I think a lot of us ask, what would I do under those circumstances? If you saw a burning car, would you pull somebody out? And so I actually do believe that there are people who, when tested, exceed or
Kevin Vickers.
Rise the Kevin Vickers. And Kevin Vickers is even better than a hero because he fits. He's Atticus Finch, He is the guy we saw in the video. For Pete's sake, he's just eliminated a deadly threat, which is his job as Sergeant at Arms. But then in the robes, he's walking down the corridor with his sidearm, looking resolute and looking like it's just another day at the office. So that, people love that kind of thing. But I think something else we can touch on is there's a certain testing aspect. Jonathan talks about being a guy working in a cubicle with a keyboard. There's an aspect about the movie American Sniper that is, if you don't say he's a hero, you're saying he's a coward, ergo, who the hell do you think you are?
In Hollywood, there is another hero trope, I suppose, the whistleblower. We don't, except for maybe George Clooney movies, we don't see as much of these anymore. But some think that Ed Snowden's a hero. There's a documentary out about him, and yes, it is being nominated for an Oscar. It's getting some hype. But people aren't racing out to see that. It's not being made into a... Yeah. So, Supriya, is our idea of what is heroic changing?
I think it sort of has to when we live in a world of 140 characters of less. I think we try and reduce things to binary terms. A whistleblower, I happen to think what Edward Snowden did was necessary, and I think he was very brave for doing what he did, but he's clearly a very complicated figure. I've heard reports of him having, kind of narcissistic. I think that's what you said.
He's a big fan of him.
Yeah. And so, but motivations aside, had Edward Snowden not, did what he did, we wouldn't have had the conversation about civil liberties and have that pushed, to the forefront, much in the way it did.
Not a hero to you?
I would have been much more prepared to say Edward Snowden was a hero if he'd stuck around and accepted the consequences of his actions rather than go to Russia and suck up to Putin in an autocracy. To my mind, that just killed his image as a hero. However, I do think that we have a soft spot for whistleblowers. To this day, Woodward and Bernstein are, they're heroes of the journalistic profession.
Well, that was 40 years ago?
It was 40 years ago, but they are still talked about as legends. And, in my journalistic profession, the great investigative reporters, guys like Kevin Donovan at the Toronto Star, the people who work at the Fifth Estate, those people who work on dangerous stories, who expose truths, they are heroes.
Do you think that the notion is changing? You mentioned the binary aspect, but in terms of the whistleblower, they're not made into blockbuster heroes.
Well, exactly, and I don't know if Woodward and Bernstein today in a 24/7, news cycle with guys like Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, I don't know if they would have been lionized by other journalists in the way that, 30, 40 years ago they were.
Yeah. Well, actually, in fairness, when the New York Times got the scoop about U.S. government listening in on phone calls, you are correct that the right-wing media actually took them to task. Rather than praise them for getting the scoop, they were seen as zealots. So that aspect is true.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I do think Edward Snowden's a hero. I think he's a complicated guy. But we haven't touched on a whole other genre of hero from Terry Fox, Harvey Milk, Rosa Parks. And again, these are people who, at tremendous personal cost, stood up at a time where it was just going to bring nothing but grief to them. Or in Terry Fox's, Terry Fox could have just been an ordinary young guy. Instead, he was running across Canada on one leg.
Or Martin Luther King. And I think there's, in fact, another aspect of heroism that we're celebrating now is single mothers who raise kids, people who fight back against poverty, people who survive horrible diseases. The fact that we now use terms
like exactly, is that heroism, a brave battle against cancer? Yeah.
Well, so that's something that's new in my lifetime. We didn't talk about people who fought back against cancer as heroes 30 years ago, but we do so now.
Who are your heroes?
I'm going to sound like a Debbie Downer on this panel, but I don't think I really have any heroes. I think as a child, the Ninja Turtles were probably my heroes then, but now that I'm
Which one?
Raphael.
Okay.
The only good one, the best one, rather, I should say. But now as an adult, I have role models both professionally and personally, but I don't necessarily consider any one of them a hero.
John?
Yeah, well, there are idols, role models, absolutely, and heroes. Nelson Mandela would definitely be my hero. To be a bit more obscure, Thomas More, who lost his head defending the church against Henry VIII, and Harvey Milk, first gay city councilor, first out politician in America, and that was brave.
I'm going to pick George Orwell, who was not just a great writer, but he went off to fight in the Spanish Civil War, took a bullet in the neck, came back to England, and wrote a whole bunch of stuff that pissed a lot of people off. To my mind, he's a true journalistic hero.
Well, I would pick Mandela, probably, but in terms of a role model, it would probably be Lucille Ball. So she's not really a hero, but she had guts, and she tried to break down some barriers. So it's just interesting, but we don't see as many movies about the Harvey Milks of the world anymore.
I think a lot of it is just, the sheer wonkery of Edward Snowden is kind of boring to watch a guy hacking computers as, being a hero.
Well, we'll see who the next blockbuster hero is. Thank you so much.